Okay, thank you everyone for your patience. We do have a motion to make as a result of executive session. So I'll entertain a motion that in the appeal matter heard by the board sustains the administration's finding and vacates the consequence.
So moved.
Thanks, Liz. Is there a discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And we will have 2 abstentions, Kim. We'll have 2 abstentions, Kim and Marla, because this was a continuation of, right. Okay. So, no public. This is the first time. I guess this is a good night not to have a public if we're not going to have it. And I should have said this first. I have 2 things to add to the agenda. Under the consent agenda, we have a termination of contract. It was in our board notes, but it wasn't on the agenda itself. So we need to add that. And then I need to add an executive session on contracts at the end of the meeting. Okay?
The exact title that was given to me is, it should say Executive Session VSA.
Oh, I've got
313.
I'll do that with the motion. I've got all that with the motion. Okay, but thank you. All right, all those in favor say, oh, we did that. Sorry.
Yep.
We're on the consent agenda. Marla, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
I was relieved of some duties today.
I will move to accept the consent agenda with the following items. The school board meeting minutes of May 15th, 2018. The special school board meeting minutes of May 21st, 2018. And the professional appointments are Karen Allard, a .5 FTE special educator at Westford. Sarah Bull, 1 FTE school counselor for EES. Emily Cook, a .8 FTE speech language pathologist for ADL. Elise Donor, .4 FTE preschool / EEE at Westford. Agni Zyka Gagny, a .6 FTE English teacher at EHS. Catherine Gray, 1 FTE 5th grade teacher at FMS. And Claudia Polakowski, a 1 FTE music mixed media theater teacher at ADL. And Mazook Weaver, a .3 FTE art at EHS, and accept the termination of the contract for Anne O'Shaughnessy at CTE, and approval of warrants.
Okay, I realize I forgot to ask if anyone wanted to pull something from the consent agenda.
I actually do.
Okay.
I'd like to pull the release from contract just for discussion.
Okay, so that means the motion will not include that piece. Okay. All right. Anything else to be pulled? All right, so we have a motion for the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Liz?
I just wanted to react to the request for the termination. Annie has done really fantastic work around restorative justice in the school, at CTE. And the loss of her, I'm already feeling. And I just wanted to It's come up a lot with Voices for Education and in the community around the move towards restorative justice as a district-wide initiative, not just in one individual school, but as a district. So I just wanted to talk about our plans for replacing Annie at CTE, but more importantly, district-wide plans. I know that you're in support of this direction. I just wanted to raise it at the board table.
I haven't had a chance to create plans.
Yeah.
We do have Ben Johnson, who
Right.
is also restorative justice, and he's or restorative practices, and he's here at the high school.
Yeah.
So hoping to expand upon that with him. I haven't had a chance to talk to the admin about it.
Yeah.
Been straight out, but it is disappointing. I'm saddened by that. But we also have different things happening at the middle school also, and it would be nice to create an overall plan for the district, systemic plan.
Yeah, it struck me in the safety forum when Annie was giving that presentation about teachers doing it in pockets and not really trained consistently throughout the district, and therefore it's being delivered in different ways. And it clearly is something that we as a board and I think as a community feel like it's an important direction. So I just wanted to put in, I'd be an advocate for finding a way to achieve that as a district-wide initiative. Thanks.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Then I'll entertain a motion that we approve the acceptance, or that we accept release from contract for Annie O'Shaughnessy.
Motion made.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. Okay, adoption of the vision. This has been a long journey, almost a year.
Yes, it has. So as you know, this started with Voices for Education, gathering words from the community, 4 words. We, as the new superintendent, I continued to encourage that and knew that that was a great, to be able to take those and create a vision from those words. So it definitely had the community voice. Also, Voices for Education, in the work that they did in October, we gathered that data. We had data from last summer, the work that I did with the leadership team, the whole entire principals, all administrators at EWSD. And then, so we did some work around our beliefs and our values. We had that data. We read a book called Building Equity as a leadership team, did a lot of work around that. And then in January, we were able to bring, as you probably remember me talking about and excited about, we were able to bring students with the admin team to create a vision. We had all that data to work with that I just mentioned, and I probably forgot some too. I feel like we had so much. So it really was student-driven in the work that we did in the morning. It took the leadership team to kind of pull it together. But as I read this, I hear the students' voice in it, which, of course, because they were speaking during that day. But there's things that will come forth even within the leadership team that they'll say. It was, kids that had the process. In the past few weeks, we've been able to reflect with the leadership team. Yesterday, we did some with the directors. And a couple weeks ago, Brian and I were with the principals and some of the directors, and be able to reflect over the year about the high points and the celebrations. And the high point is the vision. They really feel very connected to it. It fell right in line with our continuous improvement plan, and it made sense to create that continuous improvement plan in steps to get to this vision. Obviously, a vision it's not what you see now. It's what we hope and strive for, and it should be far-reaching. There's a lot of work we have to do for this vision to come truly alive. We did do a lot of work with staff also with 4 words and their belief statements, and those belief statements that they did really come out in the continuous improvement plan. So when the vision went out to the staff for feedback and to students, it was mainly the staff that had questions about it. They didn't see academics in it. They didn't see health and wellness in it. There were some things. So when I created this, just a handwritten thing, I was really pointing out some of the questions that they had in it. And where was the growth mindset that they wanted in it. And that's where the better today and tomorrow really fell in. And that, again, was from kids. If we could have the word reset in this, that came from kids. I would put reset in it. But we end up saying it a lot to each other, even. And then the book, especially that Building Equity book, as we were, many of us went to the conference, as I talked about, the pre-conference, and listened to the authors. They talked about, around the edge, I put in gray the 5 areas of equity. And the whole time, our table was talking about, oh, that's our vision, or that's the heart in our vision. So it's a real connection. And when we've talked to the directors and principals, it's the first time that people feel like it's a vision that is they can hang on to. And all of them have said, we've been through processes so many times and so many visions and writing, and so have I, but never have felt as connected. And we all think it's the kids that really that came through, and the voice of the community in it, stronger than I've ever had in writing, working with a board or a school around vision. And so.
Questions, comments? So we need to formally adopt this as our vision. Someone want to make a motion?
I'll make the motion that we formally adopt the EWSD vision as presented.
Thank you. Any discussion, further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. It's been quite a piece of work, and I think we all look forward now to expanding on it and watching the district grow, the students grow.
It's pretty exciting. Thank you.
Okay. So,
I want to jump up and down. Do you mind if I do a little dance?
Can we get to see the video again or something?
Yeah.
Doesn't the guy shoot off now?
Oh, yeah.
All of your hard work boiled down to
Okay.
9 eyes.
Yeah.
So this,
Yay.
so the second half of
That would be awesome.
the second half of the tag team is up now. Brian's going to talk to us about enterprise funds.
Yes, I've got a slideshow. I've also shared it in the board share that you have inside of your Google. So
What?
I'm now feeling
What?
We have a site.
you have a board share, so it's the same place where I was sharing the budget documents in the Google Drive.
Yep.
So I think I see acknowledgement by some and perplexion by others, so we can probably work offline to get everyone so they know where those documents are stored and they can access them.
This is not the same as our documents page, right?
Right.
I can help you, Martha.
So we'll review it here, and then I can also supply printouts if people need those, or help you find the electronic copies so you can see those. So the enterprise activities, what is an enterprise activity? So these are basically activities, they're generally segregated for the purpose of use with the intent that they're going to generate, their revenue is going to generate to fund the activity of that, and it will principally go to funding the operations of that enterprise activity. And what do we have as far as enterprise activities? We have Skill Tech, Essex Skating Facility, and the Child Nutrition Program. And they certainly vary in size. You'll see that as we go through the presentation. They vary in the size of under $200,000 to over to nearly $2 million. So an enterprise fund isn't necessarily set up for its size or impact or materiality. It's really set up for its intent, whether its revenue is intended to fund its full operations. Now, before
Wait a minute, where was the stuff?
I'm sorry.
Where's the technical center at, building trades, the house building?
The, the corporation sits just slightly outside of this. It's on our books, but they don't run an income statement so much as that all their expenses go up into construction in progress, and then they have a sale of a building and they go down. So it's more of a balance sheet showing, and it's something that's shared with the CTE Corp representative that I think
Patrick.
Patrick is on.
Wrap.
So we talk on in that basis there on the CTE Corp. But it's not so much like you see a financial statement, it's more of a balance sheet because it's construction in progress.
You remind me what skill tech is?
Yeah, I will. As we
Okay,
go through,
coming up.
we'll visit each one of these.
Foreshadowing. Okay, great.
And go through it. I did just want to say that the word that I've emphasized a couple of times is that the intent is that the revenue will be covering its operations. That's the intent. It doesn't mean that it necessarily always does occur. And there is a long-standing debate whether child nutrition program is actually an enterprise fund. And there's a current debate right now between the federal government's treatment of child nutrition programs and the state's treatment of child nutrition programs. That is sort of continuing to wage in both a theoretical as well as an auditing. About half the districts in the state of Vermont right now are pulling child nutrition into their general fund, despite guidance by the state because of guidance through GASB and other accounting standards. So it's kind of an ongoing back and forth kind of situation. So we'll take a look here of, and I mean, the minute I do this, I just want to apologize. I thought this was going to be larger. That's such a big screen, but it's so far away. But here is the operations of the rink. So we have the Essex skating facility. It is used as a primary resource and asset for the operations of Essex High School. It actually hosts 4 varsity athletic sports, 2 of them by EHS, 2 of them by Mount Mansfield, where the home ice for Mount Mansfield boys and girls. But it's more rink than we need as a school district, so it also operates as a private entity or an enterprise fund, and it does skating lessons and other things that you'll be able to see as we go in and talk about it. Its operation is fairly modest, around $300,000 a year in revenue and expenses. It currently is Noel. It goes until about mid-April. The ice is still down. Noel is going through some final billing to get some of his receivables. We should see right now this would be representing a deficit as of the end of May, on May 31st, 2018. That should close by the time we get to the end of the fiscal year and we get receivables in. It traditionally runs right around break even. It does pay a portion, its own portion of the long-term debt that was part of One Campus. So it is obligated to do that. It also is the only place that we are selling advertising, per se, right directly on. Or one of the few places. I guess we've begun to start to put some on the stadium, but you can see the advertising sales account for about $20,000 of its revenue. The skating facility, the season lasts about 33 weeks, had 36 home games plus 6 playoff games. This year it was the host of the Vermont State Championship boys team. Vermont Skating Academy calls it its home, and that offers 2 12-week sessions. Approximately 300 people took lessons over the course of this year's season. It hosted the 2018 Spring Skate Show. 4,500 people accessed public skating hours. I was not one of them. I'm a terrible skater. And the Essex Youth Hockey Association rented over 550 hours of ice time. The evening hockey program generated $53,000 in revenue. And that evening hockey program is truly evening, well past my bedtime.
Yeah.
It's a very busy place for 33 weeks. In those 33 weeks, it, along with hosting our home games, it also hosted a number of the elementary schools that came over and participated in ice skating. It, as part of our PE curriculum, is to also involve both ice skating, curling, some other events that occur there. When it's not in full session, it was also the host of all the AP exams this year. So the AP exams used to take place off-site where we could do it. Now we can proctor all the AP exams take place right in the rink. And of course, you know, it is a fabulous place for us to have our graduation ceremonies, both for the Center for Technology and EHS. And it's been known to have 950 people attend a kickoff for the beginning of the school year. So this one runs pretty reliably year in, year out. This arrangement with Essex Youth Hockey Association is by far the most profitable for the organization. And it continues to look to leverage its unique position in the county to host things like there was a veterans skating tournament that went on and other special events that occur in there. So when we take a look at child nutrition, we have a lot more ins and outs, and this is operating at about $2 million a year. And if you remember some of the discussion that we had when we did EWSD by the numbers, you know, we know that we're serving about 500,000 meals a year, are on track for that. And it's a sizable operation that we have. We have a series of monies that come in through qualified reimbursement, monies that come in through a la carte, through catering sales, but certainly the largest revenue source, as you can see, is sales to students, and that's the money that's coming in through reimbursements. We have federal commodities that come in, and then the food service subsidy in FY18 was $108,000. As far as expenses, the quantity of expenses goes to salaries and wages, employee benefits, and then the supplies and utilities is the grouping of where your commodities, your fresh produce are, and so forth. We're on track, but looking to try to bring that to a positive so that we have no deficit at the end of this year with the subsidy included. And I'll remind you that in FY19, we have no subsidy and are budgeting about a $200 surplus at the end. But for food service, we're averaging right now between 52 and 53% for lunch participation. We're doing much better. You know, the way this number works is this is an aggregate number of K through 12. Traditionally, your 9 through 12 population is a little bit less. Our 9 through 12 participation averaging is around 50%, but because that number is so large, it actually brings down some of the other the schools in the elementary particularly that are more in that 65, 67, and even sometimes getting even a little bit closer to that. It's about 1,750 student lunches on a daily basis that are being served. 1,750. So it works out, depending upon the number of school days we have in the month, you know, you're seeing a good 30,000 plus lunches served in the course of a month. Breakfast participation is averaging around 20%, really varies tremendously depending upon when that breakfast is scheduled per building. And it's about 750 student breakfasts daily. It's a little hard this year. It will certainly be easier doing our data trending and tracking in the future. It's a little hard this year to do a year over year comparison. We can look at some of the schools. There's a lot of things that have changed. We don't have a lot of control variables right now. So we can see that participation is probably across the board averaging up about 2 to 5% on each one of the schools. And some of those are having really large uptakes. All 3 schools, Essex Elementary, Founders, and Essex Middle School, all have brand new salad bars. So their uptake in fresh produce is enormous, just because it's a new event. So Homemade daily soup has been introduced at the high school, EMS and ADL. That soup is all being produced homemade out of EMS's kitchen. And so we work on a centralized food production basis, but what we've been able to experiment this year is to centralize different food production out of different buildings. So we've been able to centralize homemade soups out of EMS, been able to centralize all the meals that we make for Little Ones University. So we are the food service authority for Little Ones University, and we produce all those meals out of Essex Elementary School. So we've been able to start to optimize some of our labor, kind of manage some of our downtime. A number of those schools there have a student population that require a 2-register line. So they have additional labor requirements, some of which you may have seen when you looked at the numbers. Some of our labor costs have climbed. Part of that is that we need those for numbers. We just didn't have that. You know, you get used to working in a building with 250, and now all of a sudden you have buildings with 450. Your systems need to change and adjust. But now we've been able to optimize that labor by creating those as distribution points for production outside. And then the summer meals program that's fast on its way to start is going to be offering breakfast and lunch to children under 18. That runs from June 18th all the way to August 20th. And it's anticipated it will serve about 25,000 meals and about 18,000 breakfasts. We locate that out of one of our largest sites that we located that out of is Maple Street Park, or Maple Street location with recreation and parks. So it's a huge, and those are 100% free to anyone under the age of 18. So it's a huge benefit that goes into our community.
Brian, can I just ask on that, is it serving the Park and Rec program out of EMS as well?
There is one at EMS. There's some slight variations with the way that that's licensed, but we're trying to move it to the fully qualified like we have at Maple Street, where there is only a need for proof of age. And I think we'll see a dramatic increase in meals provided at that point as well. It works on population zones, and then what that free and reduced population is and the poverty rate is around a population zone. And if you work it right, you can get it so that it's fully qualified and there's no charge for them. And we receive the
receive the
100%
funding.
of the reimbursement for every meal. The meal is actually sort of a prepackaged meal that meets all the FDA qualifications and the reimbursement qualifications. So it's a real simple, fast, efficient way. Labor cost is real low. Food cost is managed to the reimbursement value, and it's sort of a win-win situation.
And Westford, too small.
Westford, I'd need to get a little bit more information on it. It's the concentration of poverty. They actually, you have to sort of draw a box, and that concentration of poverty has to be apparent in that area. That was part of the reason why. It's part of the reason why we're located out of Maple Street Park rather than one of the schools, is it optimized the area in which we could then qualify. Staying on child nutrition a little bit, we introduced K-8 breakfast menus that included daily specials all the way across the board throughout EWSD. Homemade smoothies have been a huge success, and planning to expand those next year. We've been able to introduce homemade smoothies throughout the high school and at ADL, and I believe they've started to show up at EMS. We're looking at Westford, try to move those out. Added salad bars, as I said, to all the schools now have salad bars, fresh salad bars. End of the year barbecues have been introduced to Essex Elementary and Founders Memorial. They have been a tradition at Hiawatha Summit, Fleming, ADL already. So those are really big community celebrations at the end of the year. And we hosted Essex Town and the Village of Essex community had dinners to coincide with their annual meetings. And the child nutrition program served about 250 dinners at each one of those events. And then we had that little event this year with All-State Music. So we served 400 extra people for 3 lunches and 2 dinners. And staying on here just a little bit longer, farm to school highlights. So we've been able to do harvest salad at each one of the schools. It was really, what we wanted to try to do is get farm to school scaled so that it could really start to serve the entire district. So we've been able to tend to maintain 3 tower gardens at Essex Middle School, 4 of the same gardens at Founders, partnered with people at staff and students at Essex Elementary to develop a garden plan, same at Albert D. Lawton, same at Fleming with an expansion to include a 20 by 20 plot, and then Farm and Schools partnered with Essex Chips and will be working with an American Corp member throughout the year to help maintain the gardens at each school. So trying to expand that immediate, but obviously the long play is to be advocating at a statewide level for a more robust agricultural economy in the state, where we schools, public schools right now through the buying group, it's 175 schools across the state that are in the buying group, really could exhaust all the available produce in the state of Vermont. The difficulty is that could be said for all the restaurants could do that. The other large food services like UVM could do that. The medical center could do that. So we're now all trying to compete against what is an insufficient supply in the state of Vermont. Our primary food vendor is Reinhardt, and Reinhardt owns Black River Produce, and Black River Produce is one of the largest producers and distributors of organics and fresh produce in the state of Vermont. So we have access, we just don't have supply. So that's some of the work to be done at our level.
Brookhill, Westford is conspicuously missing from that slide as well.
It is, right now it is, yeah. As we scale, we've been trying to scale. Westford has that next inhibitor for us is the 17-mile inhibitor. And right now, as we went to farm to school, we had resources dedicated, but we had some issues with staffing, so we ended up coming back down to about a 0.5 this year that we've been operating our farm to school operation with, and we're looking to make adjustments with that next year so that we have more capacity and can expand out to Westford. We're also trying to make sure that we get efficient in what we're doing with farm to school. Westford's enjoying all the salad bars, which is coming in with all the Vermont produce and the Vermont products and the 802 menu and other things such as that, but moving into a scaled growing plan and harvest meals is something that we want to expand to.
Certainly room for it.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe they could be our supply.
That's
answer.
right.
For skill tech, and the next slide we'll talk a little bit about skill tech, but you can see that this is a fairly modest operation, and it has had moments where it has had larger receipts. I would say probably the operations have never exceeded $500,000 in ins and outs, but it is a little bit program offered oriented. So what Skill Tech is an adult workforce development division for the Center for Technology. All the regional technical centers and standalone technical centers in the state of Vermont are part of the state of Vermont's workforce development program, as is VTC and others. And this is the retraining and certification of a skilled workforce. So they provide a wide variety of professional training. Most of them are emphasized towards the acquisition of high-level skills or technical expertise. And so things like, so the courses offered are during the evening and during weekends throughout the year. SkillTech works closely with it. So we've offered everything from an Excel course a couple of years ago, where there's like 15 people that went through and received an Excel certification, Microsoft certification. More often than not, it's like welding, HVAC, plumbing, something that would give you a level of skill or certification that would be almost directly related to more earnings, more opportunity. The goal of Skill Tech this year has been to enhance the program offerings by developing and launching a heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. a lot of this comes again through the state, but also through our local partners at the Center for Technology through the co-op programs, where we really have our ear to the ground and find out like which industries right now are suffering from not having enough skilled workers to go into them. So in the fall of 2007, started offering these courses to develop those courses into a comprehensive HVAC school for the fall of 2018. So that's what's coming up. It's a 128-hour program set to take off in September, and we've worked with numerous partners and also Vermont Technical College to provide this non-degree certificate. So this is it's a really nice way to respond to the needs of the market, create tighter, closer relationships with some of the industry, and then also help and be part of the process of workforce retraining or for workforce training.
Brendan?
Brian, do you know how many people participate in those programs?
Yeah, so in the high, over the last couple of years, you could see a really popular program may have 100 participants that go through it in the course of a year. So again, it depends upon, like 128 hours is a pretty intense commitment,
Right.
where other ones might be a 60-hour or a 40-hour commitment. So those can be run multiple times within the course of a year, and therefore be able to get more participants in it. The participant number is really sometimes dictated by industry standards or safety requirements, where like in welding is pretty small classes, where you may have something else that is able to have a 20-to-1 ratio. Probably some of the best years as far as program participants going through is in those numbers of like 200 to 400 people over the course of a year. Depending upon, and again, with some of this, you could start at the beginning of the year to pilot, experiment, construct, write your curriculum, get it approved, go in and plan to launch, and in that period of time of design, the market could shift. So there is still a little bit of a problem with that. There's a lead time to really respond,
Right.
just because of our structure, and though it's far more dynamic than if it was part of our operating.
Other questions?
Pat?
Do you know what sort of load this takes on this or puts onto the CTE staff? I believe that Bob had mentioned that he, or at least I don't think certainly not purposefully, but he does mention that he tries to focus more on the actual CTE students than the adult offerings because it's just not as cost effective. The tuition comparison. So do you know if this is causing any problems with the staffing levels that he needs to keep, or?
So there's a pretty high intensity in the administration of it. He addresses that so that that doesn't become a distraction. He addresses that through dedicated staff that is paid for by the receipts of the program.
Okay.
So there's a sort of a coordinator of skill tech that their intent with design, execute, advertise, and recruit for programs is to get enough in to make it all work.
Pay for that. Okay.
That there are possibilities, and it's happened many times in the past, that a CTE employee will become a skill tech instructor. And I think that actually looks at a value add. The person gets, they're deeper and more seeped into industry. They're working with the adults, and many of those people then can become co-op opportunities. So far it seems like it's a nice balance, but we do keep the two houses separate to make sure that there isn't too much crossover. We've run into things like when VSAC stopped offering scholarships, student aid for adults without diploma, and they just had their contraction and they were trying to move money to other places. That started to lose some financial aid opportunities for people, so that hurt us a little bit. And then we are in competition with others that are intended to do workforce development. It's kind of a soft competition, But when somebody gets a really hot program, we can feel them, we can feel a market moving to where that hot program is. So the skill tech director needs to be pretty dynamic in making sure that recruiting is working out well.
Yeah, I've seen the review numbers for the programs through the RIB stuff for us in
Yeah.
Burlington. So
Yeah.
getting those and seeing how they kind of adjust year to year is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, much more than you would see, like in our other form of business. They have to be pretty responsive in and out as fast as they can so that they can meet demand and also not get slumped with all the overhead.
Martin?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. The first one is on the Essex rink.
Yeah.
I had to come over a couple times this year to access over towards there, and very difficult for parking. Is there any time in the future we can discuss the need for more parking spaces? Just because I've got my knee issues, it's quite a problem for people that are starting to get elderly, like me.
Yeah.
And the other thing I noticed is I just wonder where everybody ends up parking during the day and where all the people versus accessing the rink in the afternoon. I've never thought to come over and check on things like that. But I know the reason I'm bringing it up is when the Prudential Committee did their assets and moved it into the merger, I was shocked because we were told that the land where those stones were put up, where we used to have a gravel lot over there for
Yep.
parking, that it was the village's, but it was on our asset list. So I'm wondering if there's room to be able to use that or find out the truth, whether
Yeah.
it really is our asset or the village's.
Yeah.
I remember that conversation.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that's, I'm sorry,
Conversation.
that's something I'm interested in. And the other thing is, I've heard that when students come to the food, through the food program, I've heard the ones at the high school, I haven't heard about the elementary, that if they are out of money or do not have it, that the food has to be thrown away. And I'm assuming it's because the student has put it on their tray. Now, this is coming from I'm going to say my husband, who knows somebody who works here, and I just felt it a shame that food gets thrown away if it is.
Yep.
Or do we have a fund where we can fund kids, because I'm sure there's some parents that don't think to give their kids money, or they don't want to admit they need free and reduced lunch. So I'd like to know what our funding is for helping out those type of students.
If I may, I can speak from personal experience. I don't think that happens. In fact, I know it doesn't because I'm definitely not really good at remembering. And my daughter has, on multiple occasions, gone to school and gotten like $10 or $20 in the hole. And
Yeah.
eventually I'll get a reminder from child nutrition, hey, bro, don't.
I haven't heard it at the elementary level. It's, I think, more the high school
So
level.
the kids without money, at least in
Classes at high
elementary.
school too on that, I know, personal
So yeah, I don't think any
Yeah.
food is thrown away. when
Yeah,
kids
so
are
I'd be
hungry.
curious what the breaking point is or why, or if it has ever happened.
Yeah, I can.
So that, yeah, if, that's a detailed question.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
If you could get back to.
There's a certain age group that my husband's with, and they yak together to each other where their taxes are going and why are we throwing away food?
Oh, yes.
And I can speak most intelligently in what's been happening for the last year. And I guess I can speak as a parent of what's been happening for the last, like 11 years. But in the last year, we had some great work with the entire educational leadership team, a number of the directors, in taking a look at our delinquency policy and what we do with regards to that, both developmentally as well as fiduciary. What is the obligation that we need to do, and sort of what are the outcomes that we're trying to do. We made a decision this year that nobody is ever shut off. We are carrying a larger accounts receivable than we have in the past. I believe it's manageable at this point in time. And I believe that a lot of us sort of felt that it was sort of a responsibility, that we know that kids cannot learn at an optimal basis if they're not eating. The idea that somebody is throwing away food now, could it be possible? Yeah, I guess it could be possible. It's really anecdotal. I mean, I know from other personal experiences that it's not happening. If somebody reported it and was able to see it at once and then started to talk about it, I'm not going to say that that person's wrong. But as a system, we make sure that kids can eat. We make sure that we're filling our fiduciary. And we have made a concentrated effort this year to relook at our delinquency policy.
Thank you. That was my understanding of what you just said, so.
And then the parking, we just tried this year an experiment with the parking for the Center for Technology to open up that whole side parking lot for both handicap and customer parking. So if you come in now, anytime during school hours, there's about 15 spots that are open right in front of the rink for cosmetology, dental, and also handicap accessible. And then fortunately, a lot of our larger events are able to be in the offset time where, for 6.5 hours right now, there's barely a parking spot on this property. And then for about 4 minutes after school gets out, there's about 450 parking spots on this area. So there are those times where there's those crunch moments, sure. But I know just by living 300 yards away from this property is that that facility, the skating facility, is going from about 4:30, 5 a.m. each morning, and then takes a break during our school day when we use it, and then goes up until 11:30. Intramurals is there sometimes until midnight, our intramural program. So, it's getting a full use, and parking as close as you possibly can be to the front door is always the highest premium. It's why we converted every parking spot in front of this building, immediately in front of this building, to handicap. And there's a lot of people that are like, I want to park there. And it's like, no.
People wait there, I'll tell you.
Yeah, they might be idling.
This
Yeah.
is a parking issue.
It's supposed to be an idling.
I think, are we overselling parking passes to the students so that they're not adequate? Because from personal experience, there's been situations where they've had the parking spot or the parking pass but could not find a spot, and then come to find out there's others that should not be parking, but it doesn't seem to be enforced. And I addressed it to Mr. Loire, and I never received a response because I wonder if the faculty is holding to their own spots or if they're spilling over. I mean, what is the enforcement? And I know it's not fair to ask at this time, but.
Yeah. I would say one of the things that we've realized that's happened over the last couple of years is that the amount of regular visitors into our career center and into various parts of this building, including different therapists that might be coming in, or school psychologists, or itinerant workers, and staff that are coming and going, all of which is good, but it's created this whole different churn.
Yep.
And you've been on the boards long enough, is when we had 1,680 students, we had limited parking to try to get this all work. And we've continued to ratchet down the number of student parking spaces because we can. There's less students, so you work on a percentage. But we have this phenomenon that there's a churn, and we're seeing also a churn on late arrival, early dismissal, and internships, and co-ops, and workplace statements. So we're starting to look a lot more like a college campus. Like there isn't a definitive beginning, middle, and end to a day. We have people that are going through.
So I think we're outside of what is truly board business. So I think if you have some of those detailed kinds of questions, I urge you to email Brian, and I'm sure he'll answer them for you. So any big picture questions on enterprise funds? Okay, let's move on to transportation. Still you, Brian.
So, what we want, the board's interested in having an update. This isn't a culminated report, but it gives the board a sense of what's the work that's been occurring along the way. I think that work is sort of broken down into 3 potential large buckets. Software has been a major effort over the course of the late winter into the spring. We have repurchased and upgraded the transportation software. The software was previously owned and operated by Essex Town. At the time of merger, the decision before I came was to let the contract expire. It had been 4 years since it had been upgraded, and actually about 2 years since it had been accessed. So we've repurchased it, we've brought it up to date, and we're working with that transportation software. We've had an on-site training completed, and we have ongoing training and support contract purchased all through FY19. So in staffing-wise, search is underway for a transportation manager. Top candidates are showing direct school and/or public transportation system experience, which I'm super excited about. Did I mention I'm super excited about that? And then also staffing drivers for new routes. System design, we've been focusing in on change and alignment of school start and stop times. That was a body of work that had to happen and to be able for us to design transportation. And we chose to do a heavy public engagement process with that over the course of multiple months, and as well as working internally with our leadership team and our staff regarding it. We've also, and now have turned our attention to really looking at developing district-wide procedures and operating practices around student transportation. And I am in the process of revising contracts. And I will talk about each one of these a little bit more in depth. And I will be getting a prescription for glasses tomorrow. So TransFinder is the same software that was being used. It's used extensively across the United States. It makes it so it's easy to manage bus routes, students, and drivers. It does the analyzing of bus routes and pickup sites and quickly adjusts if there's changes. It also creates all the analytics for us to see how we can optimize and streamline. It fully is integrated with our student information system. That was one of the things that the student information system wasn't on a nightly basis updating the software. So we will create the system so that as a new student registers at a school, they will become one of those little dots on the map, and one of those little dots will indicate their proximity to a bus stop and will change and adjust a route and give a bus stop time for them. Right now, much of that is manual as the information becomes known. Transportation manager. So this person's going to have a big job. Nice picture. Herding cats. So routing, scheduling, resolving transportation issues, establishing active communication, really looking at this person. In the first year, understand that the first year isn't going to look like subsequent years, but in the first year, really trying to get a gravitational force for all transportation issues to go through the transportation manager, though in some cases they will be supporting rather than executing. We don't want to hit this person, you don't want somebody to start in the month of July and hit them with transportation issues. You wouldn't want to surprise somebody with routes and things like that. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
I thought we surprised you.
Well, I'm the guy on the horse herding cats right there. So the transportation manager will be a key part of our overall strategy. The drivers. So where we stand right now with really, part of it is just taking the time to try to do things right with the public engagement around start and stop times, and that tremendous impact it will have on our instruction and on our future is that we'll primarily approach transportation through contracted service. The EWSD and CTE will continue to self-perform that stuff that we've been doing. So you've got your special ed in Essex Junction, you've got all your CTE, you've got all your workplace special ed all the way through, but we'll primarily contract for it. And then what we'll do is try to bring that back. It may not even, we may decide to bring it back in pieces even during the course of the year, but part of that will be the uptake of our transportation manager and our capacity. So negotiations with the current transportation contractor have yielded an agreement on increasing drivers' wages, ensuring that there'll be a $1,500 sign-on bonus. They've agreed to they will pay drivers through the training process. They've always paid for the training. It's about a $3,000 or $4,000 cost to go through bus driver training. The vendor has always agreed to pick that cost up, but it hasn't been at a paid rate. So, which has been one of the problems is that people don't want to get a job that they don't start until the end of the summer. Nobody can work that way. So, and they've also agreed to a $1,500 referral bonus for anyone that refers a driver. So that's larger than your stipend. So just think of that. So
I quit.
Don't kid like that.
Yeah.
Don't. Route modeling to date shows that we can reduce the number of new routes to handle our total planned transportation from 11 that was planned last year. This is to add transportation. If you recall, EJ was originally contemplated to need 16 routes. We put out an RFP for 14 routes. The vendor came in and suggested that it would be 11 routes. We never really saw what those 11 routes were because of a number of other issues we ran into, mostly that we couldn't staff any of them. But we've now modeled, with the help of this software, we've now modeled 7 routes that would take account for the EJ population. Yep.
Just having reduced routes a few years ago, based on modeling, it didn't end up working out
Yeah.
so well. So I would just caution
Granted.
that the road test on it
Well,
is
the time
real.
of the school times was big here.
Yeah.
Because in EJ, everyone started it, at the same
Right.
time. So there was no way, and now you've got your
Somewhat
K3s that are starting at a very different time than your 6. So that was part of it, was that we had nothing else change, where Essex Town had always had a graduation
Right.
of start times. So that's how I think we started with 16, went to 11. I think 7 is sort of not a pushing it number.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think part of the problem was that at that time anyway, because there weren't a lot of other variables except that the routing software had suggested a change because the ridership was what it was in terms of buses coming in and out
Yep.
with very few kids on them. And the provider changed at the same time.
Yeah.
So we did have a confluence of just awful things happening at once.
Yeah.
But among the concerns was that the routing software is optimizing in reality and traffic and stops, and
Right.
that I don't know that it had been well road tested with those who ride the routes to know whether or not it passes the straight face test. So
Yep,
I would-
good point.
I would imagine and assume the manager would look
Ride
at
every
that.
route, yeah.
Brendan?
Without getting too deep in the weeds, do the 7 routes, is that a door-to-door service, or is that a neighborhood stop setup?
It's both. It is heavily weighted towards neighborhood stops or congregated stops, but there are places where congregated stops won't be sufficient. Where think of a major thoroughfare for you, or like 128,
Right.
going out to Westford, or even an old stage road or something like that. So in Essex Junction, there's few of those.
Right.
So we're working on more congregated stops.
I was wondering how thoroughly the modeling is thinking outside the box.
I live in the part of the village where the neighbors across the street, their kids used to walk 20 yards through the woods and get on the town bus to the high school. We are more than a mile from the high school.
Yep.
Would these models put village students on town buses if they live
Oh
20
yeah,
yards away?
that's one of the things that I've said that we do not think in municipal boundaries.
Okay. What will happen if we don't find 7 drivers to hire, but models have put a random assortment of village students on town routes?
You know, I guess it was something I said to the Essex Reporter a while ago, is that, you know, we can, I think I'm one of the last people that can afford to be pessimistic about this. You know, if we're gonna accomplish what is a pretty challenging thing, and we know that recruitment of drivers is, I've gotta go in with a, you know, sort of a full approach of optimism and get it done. Am I cautious? Am I worried? Sure, we've all got the experience of last year, but I'm trying to be the person that's saying, we can do this. You know, 7 routes is 7 employees. We need to look internally to our 950. To ease that burden, it could be 14 employees out of 950. Maybe it's 21 employees out of 9. So I think we've got to think outside the box, because there may be a path through the woods to get the drivers that we're looking for.
With the modeling that you've done today, this speaks to 7 net new routes, but does it speak to the reduction of any existing routes?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Thank you.
And you'll see, we're actually just coming up to the stuff that's probably gonna make you feel uncomfortable, so we'll see. So that's where we might then come to that topic. So.
Where the optimism ends.
So we have the system design, so we've got the school and start times, and we've talked that as transportation gets finalized, we anticipate these start and stop times, certainly if grade cluster or maybe even specific schools may shift 5 minutes plus or minus. So, you know, we're anticipating that we're gonna have a little bit of flex happening there, because we may have a matter of, if we're 5 minutes off and we can run a redundant route using 4 buses, we wanna let ourselves flex by 5 minutes. And then the actual transportation times, when drop-offs happen, pickups occur, will likely vary by grade cluster, because we're also talking about, like, what's the earliest drop-off that can happen by buses? And so what's that wait time for school? What's that wait time after school to get on a bus? And those are gonna probably vary by grade cluster. So this is where we start to assemble some of that stuff, and we start to look at, as you know, we have a policy. The policy says the superintendent will establish a system. Those systems will be in consideration of a whole host of different things. One of them is the developmental level of the students that are being transported, and we've broken this down into a K-5, 6, 8, 9, 12 situation. You also know that the board has long talked about having a certain radius around a school that would be considered the walk-to school radius. So the board had talked about a half a mile around all the schools and 1 mile around the high schools. We're looking right now at this idea of a half a mile at a K-5 level, a 1 mile radius around a 6-8, and a 1.5 mile radius around a 9-12. A lot of this goes into some of the studies and research. We have no data on ourselves. 144 years of being a pedestrian district. But we can look at national data, and we can assume that over time we would probably look more like national data than not. But it may be a while until we look like national data. But we know the national data is that transportation for high school students, this even goes back to sort of parking passes, you know, that high school students the uptake is in the low 20%, and where in the K-5 level, the uptake is more in the 70%. Overall, it's under half of your students are expected to transport by bus. And that's national, so you're talking about major rural and major urban, environments, and you're still under, it's about 47% at the best numbers. So we need to keep that into mind, and we need to also look at what that investment is in spending for 20% of the 20% of 20% of the students, right? It's like one of those elements. The walk to school radius is one of those governors, one of those ways to constrict and create some efficiencies. The walk to stop is another one, is that we right now have a walk to stop that for some of our students is not a 0.25 mile radius, but more like 25-yard radius. And some of that creates longer bus routes for everybody, and it creates more inefficiency. And the bus times are one of the ways that, you know, parents are, I'm not gonna put my kid on the bus an hour before school starts. So they're not gonna ride the bus, but we still go to that house to see if they're gonna ride the bus. So we, there are some radiuses here. Earliest AM arrival, this is that part of like, what time do we wanna go? This is, still needs to be refined some, because we have a place like Founders that's trying to figure out where it places its music program, and how do we do that? And again, we've got issues where we've been able to solve them at ADL for the last upteen years, but now they're new, and we're trying to resolve it at Founders that has always had a start time at, you know, when they started at 8:25 a.m. It was easier in the morning. They could come in on the middle school buses. So. And then maximum wait time for PM buses. This would be that, you know, for the K-5, it would most likely be 0 minutes after the school day. But as we build, these are some of the things that go into the software system that give you more of these are some of your sort of the scales of your variables. Like, this element can flex by this amount, this element can flex by this amount. It's able to take speed limits, it's able to take driver data, it uses, it has access into like Google's API to determine average length of drives opposed to just time of speed limit kind of thing. So it can start to take into account things like lights and other traffic control issues. And then the maximum ride time of 50 minutes. So when we say this, it is all predicated that there is a safe pedestrian travel possible. So that if there isn't a safe pedestrian travel, so imagine Essex Elementary transports right now students that live in Meadows Edge, which is the neighborhood that is directly across the street from Essex Elementary. Meadows Edge is a relatively new development. It has sidewalks and pedestrian safety, you know, adequate pedestrian safety, certainly equal to, if not better than, many neighborhoods that we know it's happening currently. But we haven't installed a crossing guard across its, you know, the primary choke route. We also probably have put a crosswalk in a really bad place based upon our traffic flow. So these are the kinds of things where it may not be tomorrow, but it is a future direction set. If you recall, early on, we came up with this crazy idea that we wanted to add transportation and build a more pedestrian-oriented, you know, community, which is, you know, absolutely, you know, challenges each other, but I don't think have to be opposed to each other. So what we may be looking at is that we may have walk-to-school radiuses that we judge are not pedestrian safe now, but we have clearly identified where it is that infrastructure could be put into next. So that path through the woods, or a redevelopment of a road that now includes a segregated bike lane or walking lane, you know, different things like that could happen, where opposed to, it's not everywhere, but in these places, it would pay significant dividends to the overall tax base and community and to the pedestrian access.
The path through the woods is now gravelled, so you can send people from the Kiln neighborhood on those town buses.
Exactly. So these are really, really big modifiers to our modeling. You know, and these are the places that, when I've looked at Washington Central, Northfields District, is that Washington South? And I've looked at, down in Addison, many have moved to just this. I mean, Northfield School District down in Randolph, if you live 1 mile from any school, regardless to grade, you are not transported. So they're moving, a number of districts have moved to not transporting 11th and 12th graders. Because the uptake is so low that it's almost better to sort of work on the exception basis than to provide a primary service for so few that take it.
Yeah.
The other part so here's a little example. These are radiuses based upon the chart that I just showed. It's a half a mile around the K-5 schools, 1 mile around the 6-8 school, and 1.5 miles around the 9-12. In effect, 1.5 miles would eliminate high school busing for Essex Junction High School students, which was pretty redundant, but you know what I was saying.
So you're talking about as the crow flies mile.
Yeah,
So there could be a kindergartner who, because roads are not straight, is expected to walk 1 mile in order to get to school. There's no way that the software can use actual road lengths?
it can. I can't on Google Earth.
Okay.
But
But could we
doing it
try to
based
at
on
least
that?
do that for K through 5?
So the radius that, again, what I adopted, or my understanding of what I adopted when I came in, that was from the board's action about radiuses and walk zones, it was crows flies. So we have been building our model based upon the crow flies for walking zones, and then when we've started to go towards distance for bus stops, we are as path is. So it goes and follows a road. So if somebody, that way, because that's earnest, but, and we can make these adjustments if we wanted to go by path, a half a mile from a school, or a radius, a half a mile from school, and then there's another decision to be made with regards to distance to bus stop. Is that by crow flies, or is that, and honestly, the crow flies becomes, none of this is precision. If you have to drive all the way down a street to get to the last house that's outside the circle, some of this still needs to be perfected. But the radiuses right now are crow's fly.
Starting point.
Yep.
I guess because kids don't fly to school, I might suggest it'd be really beneficial to have, like, what is that differential? How many more routes is it if we're doing it by walking route? Because what we're asking is that kids are walking whichever perimeter we're putting, and so they have to be able to get there, because crow's fly would, I don't know,
Yeah.
put you on paths that you can't get to, through, or from, and you could end up with mileage far greater than even the biggest perimeter
So-
we're putting.
So, one thing to just look at, and it may be flip. Challenge me on it, but everybody in Essex Junction right now is in a pedestrian district. A large degree of Essex doesn't have the infrastructure to implement a walk to school.
Right.
So where you're implementing a walk to school is a 144-year tradition. Then you could look over and say, where do we work with our community partners? How do we work as a school district? Where do we advocate to build a better pedestrian-safe infrastructure around our schools up in the town? So there's some of it there. I think that the model would be pretty easy. The software is pretty easy for me to colorize a half a mile path in all directions from a school. And we could see whether there's even a dot, whether we're even having somebody to worry about at this point in time. So I'll go ahead and do that. But some of these radiuses are definitely, there's an imperfection almost either way, because roads aren't really designed to work
Yeah.
the way we want them to for this purpose.
Yeah, hey, I live 1.1 miles walking, unless they want to fly to the fairgrounds. but that means you have to
Be
make
so
sure it's
cool.
not muddy, and they're having an event and lock things down.
Yeah.
So, so that mile and a third is pretty, and I knew that Susie Wilson Route 15 corner was always a mile from 5 corners, but I had I did not know that it's also a mile from the high school. As the crow flies. So, which means only the 4 kids would be getting a bus, and not the kids in the Pinecrest area.
Right.
Being parochial, it's in my backyard. So, you know, I can't talk about Wildwood, it's in the other side of town. So, although I noticed it too is not within the walking distance of EMS. So, and there's new development. Are we speaking to the Essex Town Planning Commission as to advocating for sidewalks as they keep adding applications?
Well, the current development requirements are sidewalks on one side of the road in Essex Town.
That's only on the major routes. I'm talking sidewalks. In developments. I'm talking sidewalks on.
Oh, the major thoroughways.
They don't consider Sand Hill a major route.
Yeah.
I do. They don't. I also
not
consider
plowed,
Route
Mike.
15 a major route, but somehow I haven't convinced them to.
Well, that's the
uphold
other.
their policy.
117
You know, 117. Yeah,
The other issue is we have one community that has built the infrastructure over time, the capacity to plow the sidewalks where they, where we.
That's the big.
So we would have to, I would imagine, and as Beth and I talked about this earlier, is that, this would be a direction set, understanding that, it gets trumped by safe pedestrian travel. And therefore, we may have a walk to school perimeter defined that we're not fully executing. But like an Essex Elementary is a great example, is that, there's 14 kids in that neighborhood via the dots that go to that school that most likely are probably walking right now, but we are sending a bus to go in front of their house every single morning.
And there's like that other neighborhood that's really behind there, but you couldn't walk
Right,
on
because of
128. So there's so many challenges to that system. And do we have any sense of partnership in terms of infrastructure investment with the municipality, or we don't know
I think this is a
yet?
great entryway into it. It becomes so defined. I mean, when you start talking about infrastructure for pedestrians, it becomes overwhelming. Everyone's like, where are we gonna get that money? You start talking about, going down Tanglewood and putting in a dedicated bike lane that has a separation to it. It's a whole different ballgame.
Right.
Okay.
Good luck.
I'm really conscious of the time. Do you have more?
Conscious of the time.
Presentation? Yeah, I know, we didn't do very well on the front end.
So there's some additional operating practices that we're going to need to look at instituting. These are some that came to me from our contractor, which come from several different districts in the state. An annual ridership survey. One district has that if you're not riding 3 or more days, then you're considered an occasional or temporary rider, and therefore occasional and temporary riders are basically on a first-come, first-served basis. You don't end up putting a 91 passenger bus on a route to accommodate everyone. You try to find the bus that's going to work for the regulars. Limit 1 regular route and 1 alternative route. We currently have people that have 5 to 7 different changes over the course of a week as far as pickup and drop off and some combination thereof, so that we can manage their after school activities. And I think that that's at a cost of other kids inside the bus. So we have to look at, sort of what is most sort of fair and equitable and efficient. Just continuing this, but making it really explicit that adults must be present at home or the bus stop for kindergarten and first graders. We've got the first come, first serve for temporary requests going for routes going through the transportation manager. We have so many different pathways into changing routes right now that it's really hard to determine exactly who's on which bus on which day at, which time of day. Which is, we've run into situations where we need to know exactly that information. So system design, we finalize the procedures and we work with our vendor contracts, looking at the procedures to kind of go through and be contemplated and worked on through the month of June. These are the big elements that shape it. So I could imagine coming back on the 19th in the next board meeting and trying to get a head nod on what do we feel like. Again, almost like start and stop times is it's an administrative procedure, but there's no reason to do it against you or surprise you with it. So, but be certain that they're not going to be the most popular thing. Execute and revise the contract with the vendor. We're bringing them into the contract language that EWSD created with our legal counsel and leaving the Essex Town one. And the Essex Town one had always contemplated that in the event of a red district or a district that we would do that. It just gets us in a more contemporary language that we've vetted through our legal counsel. Hire the manager and recruit additional drivers. That would be June and July. That is, we are getting into the peak of our time, and we really want to go with an internal effort and take a look at what we can do internally. And then model and finalize the routes, announce routes to families and schools June, July. Yeah, Brennan.
What do you mean by look at what we can do internally? I don't understand what that means.
So it's, when we did it before, we helped our vendor recruit among community members. And 45% of our staff are community members, but we didn't have an internal effort to really encourage our staff to consider it, nor did we have a real effort to make sure that we would accommodate them as far as their schedule and their workflow and patterns if they did take up the opportunity to be a bus driver. So I think we need to put our skin into the game. I still would look for them to be employed by the contractor for those services, so we didn't run into benefit times and overtime and split pays. But I think we could be a little bit more aggressive in helping people contemplate that.
Okay, other questions or comments? So, as we've said all along, communication's gonna be huge. I see some potential dramatic changes here for parents, and the more lead time we can give them to adjust to that change, the better off we're going to be.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you know that. Just important to say.
I think this is fantastic, though. What we're coming up with, or what our administration is coming up, is so further advanced than last year, and I say kudos to whether it's Brian responsible or Beth beating him over the head to get him to do it. I say thank you.
Good point, Martha.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to school board self-evaluation. I really struggled with technology today, and I didn't get the final surveys until today. So Beth sent you something earlier that wasn't the right.
But I updated it,
You have updated.
so it is the right one.
Okay.
While you
So
were
the
doing your
first
thing.
thing you got was actually last year's results. So this is the same survey that we did last year. What I think I'd like to do is focus on the slides where there isn't general agreement. And this first one happens to be one of them where there is some disagreement about whether we're looking to the future. I think we should decide some of these can be topics for our retreat potentially, or some other time to talk about them. I'd say this is one that we probably should have some discussion about. So let's go through it and see where else we might want to do that. Community engagement, we're good. And I think we're quite good here on what we want for our children. And also good on having a far-reaching vision. Policy looks good. Responding to the staff and community looks good. Implementing policy by the administration looks good. So we haven't talked specifically about process for reviewing policy. I think a lot of us probably have just assumed we would do that, but we could be explicit about it. Let's keep going. That looks good. Relationship with the superintendent. Clear priorities and goals with the superintendent. There's some disagreement there, but I think we've been pretty clear. We had the 100-day plan, and now we have the work plan for the rest of this year and next year. So I think we'll keep going. We do evaluate the superintendent's performance. Evaluating her goals about student learning is good. That looks pretty good. I think probably people were a little stuck on what are our goals related to school systems operations. I think most of that actually comes through the budget, as it probably should. But I'll put that down in case we want to talk about it some more. We did a board self-evaluation last year, and we're doing one now, so I think we're fine with that. Adheres to policy, looks good. Develops a budget, looks good. And we're good about letting the administration do the detail. This is an area that we will need to talk about, and I think we all know that we didn't do as much with this year as we need to in the future. So either at the board retreat or at some other time, I think we need to have a strong discussion about how to do more community engagement around budget development. That looks good. Ability to pay. Internal controls is fine. So we haven't, I think we know that we're just getting started with our budget monitoring reports. We saw some tonight, we saw some at the last meeting. I don't think we need to talk about it. I think we can be sure it's going to happen from now on. What do folks think? Is this something we need to focus on?
I'm not completely convinced that is a board responsibility necessarily, particularly if it's related to how we're looking at personalized learning plans or otherwise. It feels more either building district administration focus, so I don't think we're doing it. But I'm just also trying to figure out to what extent it's a board responsibility.
So maybe that's a discussion Kim and I can have with Beth and kind of figure out how we should handle that. Okay? Yeah, I think we keep the community informed in the annual report. Let's keep moving. Passed on the first try 2 times. Let's keep going. Okay, legal responsibilities. Yeah, we're good about staying out of things we may have to hear. Yeah, I think we're struggling with the hearings, but I think that's a fair statement. Let's keep going. Yeah, collective bargaining is good. Let's keep going. The code of conduct we've signed, so that's good. And I think we're very good at understanding we don't have power outside of the board meeting, as well as adhering to open meeting laws, yes. And I think we're very respectful. Operating effectively, yeah, I think we have the information we need. We probably might have one exception to that, but generally we do. This isn't a good night to talk about. Yeah. Let's keep going.
Let's keep going.
Right. I think this board is good about adhering to board's decisions, and we participate in board development activities. And we understand that we don't operate the school. I think we're good about that. So, can you switch to the takeaways, the
Themes.
themes? Thank you.
Did I send those to you?
We have them, yep.
I'm sorry, I was talking to
Yes.
I have a question about the board self-evaluation. I'm always curious if administration would rate them the same as we did.
Well, you know, I think last year we had the superintendents do it,
This is a Word
and
document.
I didn't do that this year.
Sorry.
Right, I'm just wondering if they went through it, if they saw an area that
Yeah.
was disagreement with the board. I just think it's important that we look at it.
Yeah, so that's certainly something we could ask Beth and Brian to do before the retreat, to see if there's any area where you think the board didn't evaluate itself properly. That's a great suggestion, Marla. Can you find it, Brian?
Did you email it to me, Beth, or did you?
It
Just,
doesn't
yeah.
look like it. I was just gonna
I
say.
just forwarded it to you.
Okay.
Sorry.
I have no
Do you want me
vision
to do it
any
again?
longer.
There. Oh, no. Can you get it big enough so I can read
Yeah,
it?
you can read it offline.
Okay, so I took all your comments. I thought it would be much too difficult for people to try to read through those. And I looked at the themes that I saw in the comments. So the strengths of the board were said in various ways: commitment, respect for each other and for others who we interact with, communications on all levels, and our focus on students. Areas that need improvement were her monitoring student and administrative progress. We know that that's something that's coming. more effective hearings on discipline issues. It's pretty timely, given tonight, and more community involvement in the budget development. Our three most important achievements, there was quite a lot of agreement about this: successful budget votes, the level of community engagement that we've done, adding student voice to the board, and successful contract negotiations. And I really only found two themes for our most challenging moments, and one was getting clarity on the guidelines for the use of the flagpole and our whole discussions around the Black Lives Matter flag. And again, it relates to the hearings, the student discipline matters. Any comments, questions, things that people want to bring up as a result of doing the survey?
I just think we're so much further ahead than last year. I mean, it was so new, the merger, that it felt easier to fill it out this year and not as many NA and not applicable.
Well, that's how I knew that the first one was wrong.
Because
I
they're all
started
those
scrolling
NAs,
through it,
you know.
There were so many NAs. I said that this has to be last year's results. So you're right.
I just feel better about where we're going and what we're doing, probably because we now have administration consistently that we've had for the good part of the year. But that's my take.
Thanks.
I'm mostly happy.
I was just going to say, celebrating student voice, it might be a good opportunity to introduce Grace. You know?
Well, I was trying to decide if I'd wait till the task team, but Grace may want to duck out at some point. So this is Grace Liu. She is our newest student rep to the board. Grace is a junior
Thank you,
this
Grace.
year. Grace has struggled with conflicts with music obligations, including she had a mandatory concert tonight. So, but we. So welcome, Grace, and we look forward to working with you. And it is getting very late, so if you feel you have to at some point leave, we'll understand.
Yeah.
Thanks, Liz. Kim, did you have a comment?
Just on the tool, and I think I noticed a couple of questions where we're sort of questioning if the question is actually, if answered in the affirmative, would be our role. So I just think it might be worthwhile, after looking at what we're seeing for results, making sure it's asking the question that the way we would think we would be doing the work. And you and I put that together before from other sources from the VSBA, so having used it twice, it might make sense to just take a look.
So maybe you and I can work on that and see if we want to change it at all before next year.
Yeah.
Okay. Andre?
One thing, community involvement, I really think we've done a great job on one aspect of community involvement, but the budget development, as well as the annual meeting, and then I'm struggling as to how we can improve on that, because on one side, we're really doing well with community involvement, but on those two items, well.
We're going to figure it out.
Yeah, I
So
don't know.
that clearly is a conversation we need to have soon, as opposed to waiting till the budget is on our plates.
I also think to define what community involvement means. So I've had people, even outside the community, comment on our website and all the PowerPoint, all the slideshows and everything that was available to people. So what do we mean when we say community engagement? Sitting in this room, or are they engaged in the budget process via
Social media.
Right. And
Yeah.
I was so impressed with how much was going out and had people commenting on that. So
Well, that's a good point, and I think that should be part of our discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Beth just said. I think that the thing that disturbed me was such a low turnout.
Oh, I know.
Such a huge ticket item. And to hear, even though we worked so hard to communicate times and information, to still hear people say, oh, I didn't know there was a budget vote. I mean, that was the part that was really disturbing to me, is like, how, I think one of the outcomes should be, how can we really get people out to vote?
Yeah, and, frankly, that may be a discussion about the timing of the vote,
Right.
which I think is hard, but I think it's worth exploring. So, okay. But yes, we'll have a full discussion of all of that. Anything else on board self-evaluation, Kim?
I think that was also one of the questions that I pause on, the community setting the priorities for the budget, because I'm not completely convinced that that is the goal of the engagement necessarily. I think engaging around the needs of the district and having people involved in that conversation would be important, but abdicating our responsibility for the priorities of the budget to the community. So that question is one of the ones that I found worded oddly, because I don't think I would feel comfortable that that was really our goal necessarily.
Well, and nor would most community members wouldn't have the background or
Right.
the capacity unless you did a lot of framing. You
Right.
could do a lot of framing and then ask the community to engage. So, okay. Anything else? All right, so we have second reading of the fiscal monitoring policies. I hope we're just ready for a motion.
We're missing a letter from the title of F-23. It should be capitalization of assets.
Oh,
Assets.
And on the actual policy, the title says just one asset.
Yeah, it should be pluralized.
oh, so it should be plural. Good catch.
Isn't that like fish or?
I think it was there before.
It was there.
Okay, are we ready for a motion?
Yes.
Who's gonna make us?
I'll make the motion.
So, am I wording it?
That'd be great.
I was trying to,
Nice try, Martha.
I'll make the motion that we approve policies F-24, conflict of interest in procurement, and F-23, capital assets policy.
Capitalization of assets.
Capitalization of assets policy at second reading. Thank you.
So moved.
All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those- Okay, test team updates. Student rep to the board isn't on here, but I'm gonna add it. So, do you wanna go first, Liz, or you want me to go?
Go ahead.
So, we got to introduce Grace. I will also say that Nick and Robert and I the teacher who participated in the first round of interviews wasn't available this time. So the three of us did it. We interviewed 2 sophomores last week and 2 more sophomores yesterday. An incredible group of applicants. It's inspiring and it's very hard to make the decision. But Laura Printon will be our sophomore representative to the board. And are you willing to mentor her?
Sure.
So Kim will mentor. She comes with lots of enthusiasm and ideas, and her first meeting won't be till August.
She was part of the planning team for the Voices for Education group too. She's great.
Yeah. Okay, communications.
So we met this week, our team, which now includes Keely, and did some roles and responsibility breakdown. And the only thing I'll talk about that briefly is that we checked in with Brian about the role that this team could have around messaging to the community and trying to make sure that we are crafting messages clearly. And Keely is going to take the lead on that. So Brian liked that idea of getting other eyes on the messaging as we're doing this. And I just wanted to let you all know that that's happening. And Keely is going to be, so if you have questions about the way things are worded, or have ideas of how we can get messaging out, Keely's going to take the lead on that. Pat's going to continue with the board communication takeaways. I'm going to continue with the voices, leading the voices, and Ben is going to continue with the district communication work. And just a quick voices update, the group is working on those October community conversations. The planning has begun for those, and that the theme for those communication is going to be around equity. We're figuring out how to phrase it, how to be a more welcoming community. It's going to include a lot of the conversations that came up around the raising of the flag and the issues that we've heard in the community, both on social media and in this room. And I just wanted to let the board know that the planning for that has begun, and we're moving forward with that piece.
Great. Questions? Statewide updates. The legislature's still in session. I don't know what else to say. I think another interesting piece, though, for those who are just interested, doesn't directly affect us, is that the Agency of Education just came out with their statewide plan for the districts who didn't consolidate under Act 46. I think you'll probably read lots of news about it over time. They're conducting hearings in 3 parts of the state this summer, and then the state board has to publish a final plan in November. But I haven't gotten deep into it yet, but it looks pretty interesting. Kim, do you have anything to add?
No, I do think that's encouraging that they actually have the plan. so that is good. I don't.
The work that they.
Do you know, Martha? I don't know that I've heard anything with respect to the search for a new Secretary of Education.
So 3 candidates have been recommended to the governor, and he was supposedly interviewing last week.
And they don't release those names, right? I didn't
They
see
do
those
not
names.
release those names, no. So we'll all just have to wait and see what comes out of that. There was an interesting rumor last week that Rebecca Holcomb was going to run for governor,
that was
but then it was
Front page,
dispelled.
no news.
that was exciting for a minute.
For a minute.
More than a
Response
minute.
quick.
It was an exciting minute.
Did you?
Yes.
Yeah.
She didn't deny it.
It looks as though they keep finding new money to create a hole for next year. And
Right.
I had an email invitation for a conference call last week. Did anybody participate in that?
I did. So we were all muted, and we
That's the communication strategy.
We listened to Senator Ash and Senator Baruch explain what the areas of disagreement were. And then we were invited to email questions, and they answered a few questions on the phone call. Frankly, wasn't worth my time.
there was a similar.
I shouldn't say that publicly. But it's too late. I did it. Let me just say this. I didn't learn anything that I didn't already know.
And I think that the governor's office had done a similar thing a week or 2 before that, so I may have already reported on that, but I would have a very similar opinion of the experience in that there was a plan for laying out their talking points, and each question was responded to by virtue of their talking points essentially. I think there were a number of us who expressed concern for the continued use of one-time money and the impact and letting the rates reflect what community members had voted on, and it was insulting to hear their expectation that we had not communicated to people as they were voting so that they would understand the impact of their vote. And everybody, there were superintendents and BSBA board folks on the call, and each described the efforts to have informed people of the impact of the potential impact of the tax situation on votes. So again, I think that they needed an avenue for their talking points, and we at least were not muted. I mean, we were like in queue to state our comments, so maybe we were kind of muted. I don't know. It was a process that seemed as though you could have your voice heard at least. Or you could speak your voice, I should say. I'm not completely convinced of the heard part, but.
So I don't know how many of you read Vermont Ticker, but Laura Sibilia, who is an independent rep from the southern part of the state, had quite a good op-ed in Vermont Ticker today that kind of lays out the situation and the choices and some of the challenges of, I think the basic conundrum is that we have a statewide system for financing education, but the decisions about how much is going to be spent are made at the local level. So it's very frustrating for statewide policymakers that they can't control, and so that's a lot of what the conversation's about. Okay, let's move on. Board agenda for June 19th. Anybody have anything they want to be sure that we do? We'll say this task team on superintendent evaluation is meeting Friday morning, and so hopefully that will be something we will be doing at that meeting. We'll see if we can make the time work.
Are we doing anything for administrators that are leaving the district? Because we're down to the wire.
Yeah. Yeah, he wrote to me about that today, Marla. I've just been too overwhelmed to think about it. You mentioned maybe doing cards, and maybe I can get.
I just need the names of the administrators that are leaving us.
That would be great.
I did mention, though, I may be late for the 19th. I'll be returning from Boston.
Yes, you did. Thank you. I think that's in my head. I hope so.
Just on the retirements, I'm assuming within the buildings they are acknowledging retirees.
Oh, yeah.
So we used to do something.
So that's why I think
ETSD.
Marlo was talking about administrators.
Okay.
Only
That's fine.
administrators,
Yeah.
because
Right.
I know the
Central
schools,
offices. Yeah.
schools tend to handle their own staff.
Right, exactly. Okay, if you think of anything for the agenda on the 19th, let me know. So I wanted to get the board retreat date set and on people's calendars. So there are 3 possible dates in your board notes. Diane has already pointed out to me that August 14th is primary day, and she will have some responsibilities related to voting, so that's probably not a good day. I think our first choice would be Wednesday, the 15th, and the second option would be Thursday, the 9th. Grace, we are thinking that students would be there for part of the day, and part of our discussions will be about executive session type matters.
August 9th or 15th.
Yes, Keely.
giving input on our preferences.
Yes.
I have a strong preference for the 9th when my children are still in summer camp. Because then
I may have a grandchild too then, but I can make that work.
Do we know what hours, like how long we're talking about?
Well,
We said 2 to 6, was that
well,
correct?
2 to 8.
2 to 7 or 8. I
With
knew it was a little
dinner.
bit longer
Oh,
because I was
that's
like,
right.
if it's
Yes,
6,
that
skip dinner and
doesn't
just.
affect
2 to 6 is not long
Is that
enough.
what we did last year? That was the same, was it 2, was it?
Ninth.
I don't remember.
We did it after the
The-
kickoff,
Right.
so we started earlier.
I think we did lunch.
And
we did lunch.
To 7.
Yeah.
Did we maybe do lunch or something?
Oh.
We did one.
Anyway.
Some of us did lunch at the kickoff.
So scratch that, I still will have 3 kids running around for most of that.
14th is the best day of my week.
Well,
Which is the.
14th is out. It's the
I
9th.
probably-
9th to the 15th.
Okay.
I probably am traveling the week of the 15th because I can't put my
okay.
baby in daycare, so.
So 9th.
The 9th?
I can do either.
That works for me.
I could do that.
Ninth works.
Good. Okay. So the retreat's on the 9th.
And that starts at 2.
Well, what time were you thinking of having the students come, like later or?
Well, I thought we'd ask the students what worked best.
And we could plan
So,
the agenda around you.
would you have a preference?
Well, if it's 2 to 8, I have orchestra rehearsal until like 5, so I'd be here at like 5:10 until 8.
Okay.
So come for dinner, maybe.
I'm getting, Laura has a part-time job, but she said that, it's pretty flexible. So I think if she knows far enough ahead of time, so,
Maybe we could plan our agenda so that we, if you guys can join us for dinner and then
Right.
finish out the evening
so
together.
would you communicate with Laura and ask her to hold?
I don't even have her email
I'll
address,
send it
but
to you.
somebody,
Want me
if
to
somebody
send it
sends
to you?
that to me.
I'll send it to you right now.
I don't think she has a boarding address yet, but.
I'll send you her.
Okay. Okay, so finally, we still have an executive session. Takeaways? So the vision, I want to be sure that we get that in,
And transportation.
and transportation. I think those are the 2 big ones. And you can mention the policies, maybe. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Martha, do you have an executive session motion?
Transportation's gonna be like.
I move that we enter executive session at 9:50.
48.
9:50 to discuss contracts, is it? Which is VSA Title 1313, parentheses 1.
Okay.
Is that?
I think you say pursuant to VSA.
Section pursuant to that.
Okay. 1 VSA section 313. Okay, is there any discussion?
It's gone, right?
Oh, and I should have said, and we would ask, Beth to stay. Brian can stay if he wants. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Okay, we are now in executive session. Grace, that means you get to go.
Thank you, Grace.
Thank you, Mark.